trends that you see with people that have, I don't know if strong mental health is the word, but people that are happy and positive and optimistic, despite all the war and the chaos and everything that's happening in the world today? How would somebody be happy? How would somebody have good mental health? What mistakes are ruining people's happiness? Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Steve. Steve, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, pleasure. Pleasure, Alfie. Good to be here.
Likewise. So, you are the co-founder of Unmind, a tech platform which helps people with their mental health. Obviously, a very, very important topic. Tell me just a little bit, if you could, about the business, just to give the listeners some context.
Sure. So we are just under 8 years old. We started in late 2016, and we are effectively a workplace mental health and wellbeing company. We help employees to improve their mental health and wellbeing, and then help organizations to create cultures to better support mental health and wellbeing. And all of that can help both employees and an organization become more sustainably high performing. And so we, like I say, we support employees. And for the first few years, that was our focus. So we would help employees understand their mental health through a clinically validated assessment, and then we'd be able to direct them towards learning development content that could meet them where they're at, effectively, and help them to take proactive care of their minds. And that content is created by experts, various experts, clinical psychologists, positive psychologists, org psychologists, etc. We had stuff like mood trackers. We acquired a therapy and coaching company, so employees get that as well, therapy and coaching. So that covers the employee side, but on the employer side, we have a validated assessment that helps that organization measure their culture. And we measure stuff like trust and leadership and psychological safety and various other org factors like that, and help companies understand how they benchmark against other companies, but also the impact that's having on their people and also their bottom line, and then we can help them with their strategy to improve things as well. So it's a very comprehensive offering. We call it a whole person, whole organization approach, and it's an app, a platform, and we do some in-person stuff as well.
Cool. I think that's something that most entrepreneurs and business owners kind of forget about, like having a happy workforce is often a productive workforce, and it reduces turnover, it increases retention, and just makes life worth living, right? You want to enjoy where you're working and what you're doing. You must have a lot of data, Steve, right, on people and see trends and habits and common green flags, common red flags. What are the common trends that you see with people that have, I don't know if strong mental health is the word, but people that are happy and positive and optimistic, despite all the war and the chaos and everything that's happening in the world today? How would somebody be happy? How would somebody have good mental health? What mistakes are ruining people's happiness?
Yeah, so I guess maybe first of all, just to present a model to help understand happiness, well-being, and mental health or mental ill health. I think for a while, people have thought of those as like two opposite ends of one spectrum. You've got mental health problems and you've got happiness and fulfillment on the one end. The research doesn't quite support that, right? So you can almost think of it more as two axes, X and Y axis. X axis being presence of mental ill health symptoms, and then no symptoms, right? But no symptoms doesn't necessarily mean thriving, flourishing, well-being. So that's the one axis. But then you've got this other axis, which you can think of more as like an axis of low mental well-being or low positive mental health, high mental well-being. And the research shows that someone with a mental health diagnosis is still able to experience well-being, fulfillment, joy in life, if they have the right conditions and the right support and the right proactive behaviors, etc., which I can get to in a moment. And equally, someone without a diagnosis might be really struggling, like it's called languishing, because they don't have the right support, the right environment, the right behaviors, etc. So it's important just to understand that nuance. In terms, so if I'll focus more on the well-being side of it, what supports our flourishing, our mental well-being, that kind of thing. First of all, relationships is key. So the quality of our relationships. It's a very long study done, well, the results are revealed relatively recently. It was, I think, about an 80-year study, but I think what is the secret to happiness and well-being, and the biggest factor was quality of relationships. I think that's important, and I'd say quality of relationships comes down to our capacity to pay attention to one another, to listen. I think those are some key things that we can do from our side. Besides that, the obvious things like lifestyle, so healthy eating, getting enough sleep, that's a foundational factor for well-being. Good nutrition, movement, exercise, all of that. But then also coping mechanisms to be able to handle challenges that you face in your life. So we can learn those. But I think social support during challenges is obviously really important. It comes back to the relationships piece as well. The final thing I'll say is I think mindset does play a role here. How we view the world, how we view ourselves in the world can make a difference when it comes to how adversity impacts us, right? If we see it through a more hopeful, optimistic lens, and I don't mean a Pollyanna, everything's wonderful lens, but like try and find that silver lining, hope doesn't mean wishful thinking. It means believing in a better future, but then taking action on that and having some sense of agency. So I think mindset plays an important role as well.
I love the emphasis on relationships there. I mean, the quality of your relationships really is the quality of your life. If you're surrounded by miserable and depressed people, it's going to rub off on you, and vice versa, right? If you're surrounded by happy, excited, energetic, passionate people, it's only a matter of time before you're going to become happy and positive and energetic, and you really, really are the result of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Translates into everything, right? From your health to your level of income to your relationships, your state of mind, and beyond. Okay, cool. I think that's some good insights there for people that kind of want to increase their optimism and positivity when it comes to the mental health. This is not your first podcast, right? You're no stranger to podcasts. You've even hosted your own in the past, right? You've interviewed guests like Tom Daley, the Olympic diver, Reggie Yates, the radio DJ, and many, many other highly talented and successful people. Was there anything specifically that you learned from these guests? It could be the people I mentioned, it could be somebody else. Was there anything that really stuck with you and had an impact?
I interviewed a range of really brilliant, interesting guests. In terms of things that I've learned, I guess on reflection, and they each had something unique to bring.
Yeah.
But I think what I learned was that what the golden thread between all of them and their success and their well-being in life amidst challenges, right, was their expression of authenticity in the world. In other words, not trying to be someone else, like just being their weird self, being their unique self. I think they all seem to share that as a trait, and I think that's really important. And to come back to your previous question, I think it links to that as well, like feeling like we can be ourselves in life, at work, etc. I think that's really important. I think I found out the other day that the most searched for word last year was authenticity. I think that's something that people are struggling to know exactly what that means in today's world, but something that people really want. And I think those guests that I interviewed each were really authentic. They were themselves, and they were open with their challenges and their lives, really. So yeah, that's what stood out.
I definitely agree with you there. You picked like a good bunch of guests if authenticity and being genuine was what you were going for, right? That definitely was the thread across those people. And it's a big problem in today's world with imposter syndrome, because people they feel like they can't be themselves, and they feel like they're being somebody else and whatever, and then that really, really drags on their mental health. They
Definitely.
Because if you open up Instagram, it's probably the worst thing for your mental health, right? Just scrolling through and seeing the perfect version of what everybody's life is, when in reality, it's not really, what you see online. We all put a persona on, we all put an image on, we all pretend to be an exaggerated version of what we are. And then that can really, really have an effect on people's mental health if all they're seeing is the good and not the bad. And they think, oh, why aren't I like those people? Why aren't I, achieving those things? Some of the people that you mentioned there, they've gone through big, big challenges publicly, and they've had to face that, with loads of cameras looking at them. Tom Daley being an obvious example, right?
Yeah. Tom Daley, Frank Bruno, his name eludes me, the musician from Busted. His name comes to me just now, but they've all gone through their challenges, and they face them with real humanity, right? You mentioned imposter syndrome there. I know it's something that many people encounter today, and I think it's certainly magnified by social media. But that's something that I experienced, not necessarily because of social media, but because of becoming a founder without a prior business background, right? And then all of a sudden becoming a founder of like a company of a few hundred people and then an executive, all those kinds of things, and the supposed connotations that come with that. Then you think, oh, I need to be X and Y. And in the beginning, my approach was to focus on the things I didn't have, like my weaknesses. I need to get these right. I need to be a certain type of person to fit this, right? And that I really struggled because of that. Like, it made me unhappy, probably made me less impactful in my role. And the switch, which relates to what we've just said, was forgetting that and really just leaning into who I was and recognizing my unique strengths that I had, and which might have been perceived as weaknesses before, but really leaning into who I was. And when I started to do that, then, started feeling far more fulfilled at work, far more impactful. I'd say my performance increased. And I think it's an invitation for us to not compare, but to really dig in to what our unique offering is, and then to double down on that, right? And that, it's our strengths, it's our personality, that's our calling, all that kind of stuff. I think it's an important switch to make if you are trying to be something else or someone else and focusing on your flaws.
Hey, this podcast is brought to you by welovealpha.com. If you're looking to grow and hire and scale your software engineering team in the UK, then go to welovealpha.com to hire the best software developers on the market. Everything across Java to C# to PHP to Python to React and Angular and mobile and more. Go to welovealpha.com to hire the best software engineers in the UK now.
Yeah, it's one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given, really. And they said, Alfie, stop trying to fix all the areas where you're not so strong. Instead, just spend that time double downing on your strengths, because there's certain things that I'm good at that I'm really good at, right? But then the majority of things I'm pretty shit at, right? So I just need to focus on my unique skills and that sort of thing. Not to say that you can improve and learn in the other areas where you are not that good at. You, I know you're quite into that whole journey. You did an interview on the Researching Happy podcast a while back, and you talked that you read a lot and reading books is really important to you. Are there any specific books that you would recommend listeners read? Most of the audience are tech entrepreneurs and founders and software engineers and investors and people building cool things in tech. But obviously your angle has been very, health tech and mental health focused. But is there anything in particular that people should be reading that are listening to this today?
I read a lot, and I got loads of books and loads of interest. They typically focus within psychology, spirituality, human development, potential, all that kind of thing. To be honest, I would say the books that one should focus on, as a founder or entrepreneur, probably aren't the traditional ones you might expect that are about business. I would say they're the ones that are more that serve your expression of your potential as a human being. I think that can have an outsized impact on your capacity as a founder. So with that in mind, sure, there's loads, right? There's a book called I and Thou by Martin Buber, philosopher, and that's a good book in terms of how to relate with others. It's I and thou versus I and it. I and thou being recognizing common humanity in the person you're speaking with or being with, versus seeing them as objects, as utility, seeing them through the lens of utility, which can happen in a workplace, right? And as a founder, you might see people through just the lens of utility, but it's really important that we don't. So I think I and Thou is a great book. Loads. I read a lot of Krishnamurti and Osho. That's more around just tapping into one's, I guess you could say, potential through more of a spiritual lens. There is an author, her name's Carol Sanford, and she's a systems theorist, but she's really pushes the boundaries in terms of how we think about our organizations and our roles in them. She's transcended the traditional mechanistic thing, but also then transcended the humanistic paradigm, which is we are here to save everyone within the organization. We're the hero, and she transcends that as well. And she just really invites us to think about our roles in work and in life in new ways. So that's what comes to mind, but I've got loads of recommendations I could make.
How do you tend to listen to books? Let's say listen, is it Audible, or do you read physical paper books or Kindle, or what's your process?
I read books.
Yeah.
paper books primarily. I mean, I gave away about 500 books before coming to England, and I've got probably about 1,000 books now. As much as I can keep in my house, I get paper books, but then I'll revert to Kindle sometimes. Sometimes I'll listen, but I find that I just like to have the books. I like to take notes and all the rest, highlight. Yeah, so reading books, paper.
I'm the same. It's my preference, and I really destroy them, to be honest, Steve. I like I like underline and circle it and rip pages out and staple them together. And I often, you know how you got like a few blank pages at the front and the back usually to take notes. I often will run out and I'll end up like bringing A4 paper over and stapling it on to make it an edition. It's something that I miss since I've had my kid. It's been completely audiobooks, to be honest, because you have to really learn how to multitask. But I'm excited for when he gets a little bit older and I can finally go back to the 500 books I have not read yet, which have been staring at me every single day on my shelf and making me feel bad. But
you're right. I mean, I understand that the challenge and not having time. It's so important to like engage with the book. Like there's a book I read called Optionality, but that one I really engaged with. It's got tears and so much stuff in it, but it's one that really sticks with me because I engage with it. And just quickly to come back to, I mentioned Carol Sanford. So her latest books, she has after each chapter something that she calls intermezzos, and they are questions to prompt reflection. But so in other words, what she's trying to invite is not read my book and then take my ideas. It's like, how do these ideas work in you? What do they make you think? And how do you want to then apply this? In other words, shifting it from like just read knowledge to like something that you're going to actually embed in your life and like turning them into your insights versus just taking insights, if you know what I mean. And I think working with a book like that can really yield that.
And really take action on the ideas as well, because if you read 500 books but don't do anything, then what's the point? You're like, it's much better to read 5 books and then have, you know, a few bullet points on each of them. And it's something that I was very, very guilty of for a long, long time. And my justification was, oh, but I'm getting smarter. It's, you know, it's helping me. It's helping my mindset, whatever. But I wasn't really, you know, moving myself forward much. It was just kind of like, it was just like knowledge porn. It just kept going around in my mind. It was like a lovely idea, but it wasn't actually practical. Something I've really tried to do more often, Steve, is finish a book, you know, go through all my highlights, trying to condense it down on a Notion document to a couple of bullet points and specific actions that I can take, and then add them to my calendar, because then at the end of the book, I've turned it into a bit of an action guide and a couple of steps. And even if it's just 1 or 2 things, it's better to do that rather than just absorb the theory and live in that information, which can be a bit of a challenge though as well, right? Because it means that instead of reading like a book a week, it can be like a book every 2 or 3 weeks, because I spend so much time actually working on the steps involved rather than just going on to the next one. But it's more practical if that makes sense.
Exactly. I mean, I've had to, what I do is I read 10 books at once typically, which is not what you're saying here, which is, and I think your approach is a sound one. I almost do bits of both. There's some books where I'm going to deep dive in, and then there's others where I'll read a bunch of books on a similar but not the same topic, but I like to then draw like insights from all of them and then like synthesize into new ideas. And so I think for me it's a bit of both approaches, and I think they both have value. But I've had to work hard on not just reading like thousands of books at once. And
I'm with
that's my
you.
tendency.
It's like a chapter of one, and then the next one comes out, and you're like, okay, I'll do a chapter of that, and then I get it. As well as books, you sometimes write blogs and a newsletter. It's called Humanity at Work, and you shared a bunch of quotes within this from interesting people. One of these I really enjoyed. It was from Albert Einstein, and it really stuck with me. He said that if you look deep into nature, and then you will understand everything better. And I thought that was an incredible quote. So I'm going to repeat that. Look deep into nature, and then you will understand everything better. Why did you share that quote in the newsletter? What in particular did that make it stand out to you?
So my process for those newsletters is I do the quote at the end, and in other words, I'll find a quote that aligns with whatever I've discussed. So it came afterwards, but it relates to something I've been thinking about quite a lot over the past year or so, is the lens or the metaphor or the paradigm that we use to think about our organizations. I think that what we're stuck with is more of a mechanistic one, and you might say it's born out of, let's say the Industrial Revolution and maybe Taylorism and all the rest, but we knowingly or unknowingly see our organizations as machines, and employees knowingly or unknowingly as cogs in that machine. And just looking at our language could suggest it, like streamline operations, execute tasks, etc., etc., right? You know, some of the common business lingo, which is fine in and of itself, but I think it reflects this broader issue, which is a lens that is not true, right? Like we are not a machine. An organization is not a machine. I don't think it's the right lens to use for the flourishing of that organization. And so anyway, I think a more apt lens is a living systems one, and recognizing the life within an organization. Once you recognize that, you ask yourself, okay, well, what helps a living system or a living thing to flourish? And so then it starts to invite new things to focus on. And I talk about that in the newsletter. But that's when I came across Einstein's quote. I just thought it was a good fit for what I was talking about. I think nature has a lot to offer us when we pay attention to it. So,
yeah. What about advice for other writers? I've been writing a newsletter for a while now, and I find it can be more difficult to almost delete rather than write. You do a splurge of information, and then you have to decide what's actually worth keeping in there. I wrote a book a few years ago, and originally it was like 700 pages, and it took me so long to get it down to the 150 pages that actually mattered. But it was much better quality having it that way rather than just a mind mess. What is important to you when writing, and what tips would you give to others that are looking to maybe do like a newsletter or a blog of their own?
I guess the fact that you've written a book, you probably have more to offer on the art of writing than I do. But I have learned some lessons as I've written over the years. For me, I have a tendency, and I've had a tendency to be verbose and to just want to say a whole bunch of things and express myself a lot. With my writing, I've really worked at, so initially I will just write and then I'll work at editing it, but like really trying to get it down to punchy, economical phrases that aren't overly flowery in their language and that are like, you know, just human, everyday kind of language. That's where I'm trying to get to these days, is that, right? Human, down to earth, everyday, concise, punchy, relatable. And for me, I just get there through hacking away at my initial content. I don't know if that's how you approach, but I'll write it all out and then I'll actively work to, sometimes I'll set some constraints. Okay, I need to turn this into X amount of words, which then forces me to really get succinct. And actually that's the approach I took with my newsletter, is I've really made it bite-sized. Like I've made it such that you can read it in 60 to 90 seconds or maybe max 2 minutes. But that constraint has forced me to really get to the essence of what I'm trying to say. So that's been my approach.
I think that constraint is very important in the TikTok world that we live in that getting somebody to read something that's very, very long can be a challenge, unless they're picking up a book. You know, newsletters that are 20 pages are newsletters that don't get read for the most part, right? So yeah, and if you can get your point across, and if you can share your message in 100 words, as opposed to 1,000 words, and it has basically the same effect, then 100 words is better, because, you know, time is the most valuable resource that we have, right?
Definitely.
What about the other element of content creation? When you were doing a podcast, and we're kind of circling back a bit here, but what do you think makes a successful podcast host, interviewer? What type of questions, what type of format, kind of structure, what kind of atmosphere? You know, you interviewed a wide range of talented people. Was there anything that you learned about how to interview and how to be a host and that sort of thing?
What I learned, or what was confirmed for me, I mean, I would beforehand, I would do my research, and I would have a sense of the kind of direction I want to go in. I would let that person know just high level themes that I might want to touch, but nothing too prescribed. But what I think was inevitably more impactful was perhaps from my perspective as a host, just being myself again, and coming back to that, just leaning into your quirks, leaning into who you are. So that's what I endeavored to do, and I think that worked. And then just really trying to have a human conversation with the person in front of me, right? Like not trying to force it too much, and just asking open-ended human questions that give that person a chance to explore for themselves in the moment, right? And also maybe shift them out of what might be the same old stuff they always say. So ask interesting questions that they may not typically have been asked. But for me, being human, being authentic, and being curious, just being genuinely curious, right? I think the right things will follow from that. So for me, that's what it was about.
Yeah, the curiosity for me is arguably the most important thing. I find that a bad podcast, and my first 50 episodes were this, where it was I had 10 questions written down, and I'd ask the question, I'd get the answer.
Sure.
Okay, then it's the next question, then it's the next answer, and it wasn't a podcast, it wasn't a conversation. It was a formal interview, and that's fine if that's your thing. But having an actual conversation and discussion is 1,000 times better. And you might start here, you might end up over here, as long as you keep it on the same. On the structure overall, then it kind of hits the key points. But sometimes I've thrown the script completely out the window and be like, all right, let's talk about this instead. This is far more interesting than what I've got written down. You said
that's fresh. It's fresh and it's alive and it's emergent and it's in the moment, right? And I think we like that.
It's real. Yeah, people want to listen to real conversations. They don't want to listen to something corporate and boring, right? You mentioned something a moment ago when you were talking about the Einstein quote, which I thought was quite interesting. You said businesses should be run as a living system rather than a machine. And I think that's very, very true. Within that living system, you have various different seeds which are growing, which you hope become trees and branch off and do different things, especially when you're in startup world. Let's talk about a couple of those and I guess share your thoughts and advice to other founders that might be on that journey of planting those seeds to make that kind of living system a reality. So you need to first get a great team together, then you need to build a product, you need to market it out, and then you need to make sales, and you're going to need to reinvest it and make it a success. So let's start right at the beginning in terms of recruiting and hiring and putting together that amazing team. How does somebody do that, Steve? Like when you're building Unmind, what do you look for in people? Not just the technical skills, but what kind of personalities, behaviors, habits, principles? What are you looking for when building a high performance team and culture?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps that has evolved over the years, and maybe that's part of it as well. Like who you're looking for will evolve over the years. In the beginning, given that we were starting out, it was very much mission fit. We hired people who were genuinely passionate about what we were doing and believed in what we were doing. So it was that kind of mission fit. And we were seeking to support employees' mental health in organizations and create more mentally healthy workplace cultures. We wanted people who felt that was a really good thing to do and who had a story of their own that linked to that. So it was a very, like I say, mission fit, which is, I think, a good way to start. Closely linked to that, values fit, but to be honest, we hadn't defined our values in the very beginning. But I think you can just sense. You need to be able to work with the small group of people, be able to really handle challenges together. You need to get along. I don't mean saccharine, all is well, but get along as human beings and really believe in what you're doing. So it's that. Then as we started to grow, it continued to be mission fit, values fit, culture fit, but also culture addition. I think it's really important that when you are hiring to not be overly cautious here, but you don't want to hire someone who might tick all the boxes in terms of being like a high performer, etc., but someone who comes in and causes more problems than the goodness they bring to the organization, right? So that person needs to be able to be like a force multiplier for others and have a positive effect on others. I think that's important. I think you can sense that in interviews as well. And then for us as founders, myself and Nick, from the very beginning, it was about bringing in people who could do what we can't do. And that's continued to this day, right? So bringing in the right people, right expertise, skill set. And that's become more so as we've progressed on our journey. And then also for us, when I'm sure this was going to happen to many startups, we've intentionally evolved our culture over time to better fit the market that we're in, the circumstances that we are faced with, the new challenges, etc. And we have hired to then accelerate that cultural shift as well. That'll look different from startup to startup, but I think that's also an important consideration.
I agree with you around culture add rather than just culture fit,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
culture fit, you just get a bunch of people doing looking, talking, walking, sounding the same, right? Culture add much more impactful to adopt that and make it better over time. Okay, so let's say people have got a great team together, Steve. They've kind of followed, those concepts. What about in terms of building the product? You built a really cool product which you've iterated on and got better and better over time, but a lot of people, they're just trying to sell like something that's not good, and then they're wondering why their business isn't growing. How does somebody build something that people want to buy, something that people want to use, something that really adds value and helps benefit the world in a positive way?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you need to understand why you're building what you're building in the first place. Like, understand what problem you're trying to solve, understand the people or the companies to experience a problem, like understand their needs and build for that, right? And then get feedback as soon as possible. You want to get feedback, iterate, and get real world feedback. We got our first client before we'd even built our product, but it was more through our prototype. We took it to a benefits conference, but then you start to get feedback from clients, customers, the market, etc., and go from there. So this is probably just standard knowledge, but iterate and know what problem you are solving. For us, I guess, and I've come across this as being important. I think it was Roelof Botha from Sequoia spoke about founder market fit being really important. I guess for Nick and myself, like this was just a continuation of like what we were doing before we started Unmind in terms of the problem we were trying to solve, right? He was a clinical psychologist. I was in the workplace wellness space, and so it was we understood that problem. And I think it's important that you understand the problem and bring something innovative to that. And I guess that's how we've approached it, and then hired the right team to build the product. It's like Nick and I will bring a sense of a vision and ideas, but we need to have the right product experts building our product, which we do have as well.
Product market fit important, but founder market fit so true. And you've stuck to that over time, because there's decade-old videos of you on YouTube when you were doing more like fitness and kind of mindset coaching on radio shows, right? So you were the founder that could build this. Perhaps the market wasn't ready for it, but when the two aligned, then the magic happened. And similar to what you said earlier around about kind of look this stuff off, it might sound like common sense. It might, but it's not common practice, right? People hear these ideas in the abstract, but how many of them actually execute them on them in reality? Very few. So they've built a great team. They've got a great product. Obviously easier said than done, where we are doing an accelerated version of this, right? But let's say they need to get that product out there to the masses, Steve, and really start marketing. Let's talk about marketing, and then we'll do sales. So what advice would you give on marketing? How does somebody get their amazing product with their amazing team and let the market know about what they're building?
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel like if I were to give you answers here, they would be not disingenuous, but like within my company, like from the start, I've known what my strengths are and what they're not. And I didn't come from a commercially driven background. I've literally, it's going to sound so trite and cheesy, I've just like followed my gut and my passion, right? But then we brought in people to oversee parts of the business that we didn't have, and let's speak for myself, that I didn't have the experience and the let's just say the experience in, right? And so I've not overseen marketing or sales since the beginning, which is I guess an honest answer. How we have approached it, though, again, has evolved over time. In the early days, it was just getting out there in front of people. Like, so we would go to the benefits conferences, and we'd get out there and we would speak and we would connect, and then that would then lead to like word of mouth. And so that's how we built in the beginning. It was very much around, and to a degree it still is in some ways, but it was very much around relationship building, building trust, and then those people / companies like almost becoming advocates for you outside of that. We've obviously become a lot more sophisticated, and if I had my chief commercial officer on the call now, he would give you a far more robust answer than that, or our VP of marketing, etc. So we do have a strategy in place, don't worry. But yeah, from my perspective, it's what I've just shared now.
Yeah. I've always operated the same way, just relationships, adding value, community.
Of course.
It's never been about a fancy SEO trick or some kind of paid secret. That stuff, somebody else is probably world class at it. I'm not, you're not. I think we can be honest when it comes to that side of the coin. But that's why the first couple of sales are so important, because then that gives you the springboard to reinvest into hiring the skills where you lack in. We talked before on this pod about doubling down on what you're good at and hiring for the weaknesses, and that's a perfect example of that. I think that
the one thing I will say, just quickly, the one thing I will say on that is, I do think your brand can obviously sell itself if it's a strong enough brand and you know what you stand for and you know how to communicate that out in the market. And I think that's something that we've been very good at from the start. And so that, I would just say that has been really important. Know what you stand for and communicate that well and be consistent in your messaging.
And consistency being so important there. You see brands which they pivot 100 times. Suddenly they've got a new, from small things, from a new logo to a new color scheme to a new name to a new mission to a new purpose. And eventually you're like, come on guys, stick with something. You gotta know what your values are, what your principles are, share them with the world, and your story, right? You gotta tell the story consistently over and over and over again, and have people buy into that mission and buy into the problem that you're trying to solve.
I mean, I do think, okay, it's been 8 years. So we've had a few points where we've evolved actually one point, we changed our values once since day one to now. And it was necessary because, you aren't static as an organization, you do grow and evolve. And we're in a process, I would think, of maybe shifting our mission statement, but the overarching problem that we are solving, or let's say the overarching vision of what we're trying to realize in the world is consistent, right? So there's a very real through line there, and that's what I think you need to get right as an organization. Otherwise, it's never just been what can we do to make money kind of. It's that hasn't been that, and there's a place for that. But if there's a real authenticity of connection between what you're doing as a company and the vision that you have, and it's really authentic, then I think that can translate out well into the market. And
agreed. Okay, let's finish up with, before your business career, you had a very interesting origin story, right? Like myself, you were in the world of entertainment for a while. So you spent 10 years as a professional singer, as a songwriter, even an actor. What did you learn from the world of entertainment and show business, which can be applied to being a startup founder and an entrepreneur?
Probably the primary thing, the most useful thing that I have transferred over from there is a capacity to get in front of an audience and connect and inspire and influence, let's say, or let's just say inspire or connect, inspire, however you want to term it. And that served me well, in a leadership role in terms of, you need to be able to do that with your organization. It served me well with clients. It's I would say served me well in terms of evangelizing our philosophy and what we believe people need to know to create a more mentally healthy organization. So it's been able to get up in front of people and connect and communicate with confidence and authenticity, I think. Other than that, I mean, perhaps there's the creativity. I was a jazz singer and a songwriter, and I do that stuff kind of in the moment. Perhaps that's transferred a bit over into how I create content. I'm not sure. Maybe that's a tenuous link. But the main one is the capacity to get into my body and sort of express from there. That makes any sense. It's quite intangible, but it's something along those lines.
Yeah, I agree. Like most people, when they're building a company, they might be amazing at the technical side or trying to build a product, but if they can't get out there to people, they can't present, they can't sell and persuade and build relationships, then it's not going to work. You need both sides of the coin. And I agree with you, Steve. I learned a lot around showmanship, around presenting, around running a small business, and entertainment is in many ways the kind of the area to do it. For context, I wasn't a musician, but I was a professional magician for many years. Yeah, so slightly different. A bit of a weird origin story, but stuff that I learned and was taught in that world has been far more important than doing business at university or you know, in many respects, years and years and years of client meetings and that sort of thing. I just learned so much more from be failing on stage. It's like a comedian. If you go up and get heckled over and over and over again, you'll develop an amazingly thick skin, which could help you in sales and persuasion and business.
Definitely. Yeah, resilience and the capacity to like connect with yourself in a moment, I think is really important. Just as an aside, my father once introduced me as a magician by mistake to one of his colleagues. He was trying to say musician, but he called me a magician. So there we are.
Did you have to try and do a magic trick?
No, I just let it slide.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, look, thank you so much, Steve. It's been good to get the story of your business in terms of the lessons learned along the way, but then also, I guess, what that's taught you about the other sides of the coin, from everything from, you know, from marketing to recruiting to how to be happy and how to inspire people to kind of live their purpose as well. If people want to check out Unmind, where should they go to? What should they search?
Yeah, unmind.com. And you find us on LinkedIn, and unmind.com's website.
And if people want to find you on LinkedIn as well and your profile?
You'll find me on LinkedIn, I think just Steve Peralta. Yeah, and I'm on Instagram, but LinkedIn's my main space.
Okay, great. Well, I'll put a link above below you right now. Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Steve.
Of course,
thank you.
Good to chat. Thanks, Alfie.
Awesome.
Hey, thanks for watching this podcast. Make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, comment, etc., etc. And I'll see you in the next episode.